Hi, my name is Ryan. Today I'm working on my dad's charger again. Today, we're going to try to get a radiator into it. This is the radiator that came with my dad's charger and was installed in it. Probably the original one. It looks to be in fairly good shape and I was hoping to reuse it. But the problem is, in almost 20 years it was sitting, this cap was open to the elements. So if you can see inside, it's all filled with rust and debris. Initially I tried to clean it out, but just tons and tons of rust kept coming out. Peanuts and stuff were coming out of it, which tells me a squirrel made its home in there. All sorts of debris still in there. I can shake it around. And you can still hear stuff moving around in there that I can't get out. Plus, when I was rinsing it out, water was leaking from all over the place in here. So this thing is full of pinholes. So this radiator, unfortunately, even though it looks like it's in pretty good shape, isn't usable. Now, I don't have much of a budget to work with here. I'm kind of on a shoestring. So my first option was to try to find a replacement. But right now, in 2022, replacements for these things are impossible to find. I could go aftermarket or get a custom radiator built like a lot of guys do for restorations or performance on these. But they're quite expensive and I just don't have the budget for that. So I did what I do best. So I ran around a pick and pull and pulled this out of a Lexus SUV of some kind. It is quite a bit thinner than the original, but it's about the same size. It's a little bit bigger, and importantly, the intake and outlet ports are nearly the same size, and it has a transmission cooler built in just like the original. So I'm hoping this works. It seems like it's going to fit. I just need to move some stuff around first. If this is too small, no big deal. I can always replace it again down the line. But for now, this is what I'm going to be trying to use. So today, I'm going to try to clear out some space in the engine bay to make this fit. And then make up some brackets so I can mount this, because obviously this won't mount to the stock holes made for that radiator. And then once I have all that sorted out, I'm going to start sorting out piping and get this hooked in to the engine block. So I've already done a test fit in here and it almost fits, but it's hitting on the edge of this battery tray. So right now I'm going to actually remove this battery tray and fit the radiator, and then I'll figure out the battery solution later. I think I should be fine because it's just hitting on the edge of this and there's plenty of room to move the battery that way. So I think moving it that way or even rotating it a little bit will give me enough clearance for the radiator. So with the battery tray out, this radiator fits almost too perfectly. See, the upper hose lines up almost perfectly. The lower hose is on the wrong side, but I can run a hose to that easily. The transmission cooler lines from the engine block, which are down there, line up pretty close to the cooler lines that are coming from the radiator, almost touching right there. So a short bit of rubber line will be enough to connect all those. The fan clears everything, which is great. And you can't really see it from here, but the factory mounts for the radiator actually sit on the subframe. The factory mounts for the radiator is in the factory Toyota Lexus. There's these like mounts that these kind of seat into, and that's how the radiator's held on. They're actually sitting on the radiator support, and they're rubber, so I'm not too worried about the vibrations. So now, to permanently attach this, what I'm going to do is take some strips of steel, make some brackets that'll interface with the factory mounts on the car, and wrap around the bottom of the radiator. And then I'm going to take little straps and run them from these bolts on the radiator, these holes on the body, and that'll be what holds the radiator in. So you may notice that this sticks up quite a bit, and I was worried about this hitting, so I've actually closed the hood. And even with the radiator cap on this, it sits in this area of the hood, which goes in quite deep. So even with the hood closed, there's still about an inch or two of gap between this and the radiator cap. So even with this sticking up as much as it does, it's fine. It's not going to hit anything.
In Genoa, Be a little bit more of it. Yeah. This isn't north of the Kentucky River and White Swim. Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to announce plans before they happen, but no, that's something we'll I think we can get to that very
So this and this are the factory mounting locations for the old radiator. So all I'm doing now is I'm going to take these plates and figure out roughly how I want them to sit and mark them to drill some holes to put the bolts through. And then once I get the brackets for the radiator itself made up, I can weld them to this after figuring out exactly how I want to sit. And that way this can bolt the car, the bracket can hold the radiator, and then we're all good. I'm going to label these left and right. So this is the passenger side of the car, so this is right. So whenever you're labeling left and right in a car, you always want to imagine if you're sitting in the driver's seat looking forward, what's left and right. So if I was sitting in the driver's seat, this would be my right, so this is the right, other side's left. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to eyeball it, mark these, then measure a distance between these holes and make sure they're the same on the sheet. And then once I confirm that, I'll drill them out. $17.5. Just a little bit, 17.5. And now I do the same on the other side. So to drill these holes, the best tool for the job is a drill press. This is not a drill press. This is a benchtop mortiser, which is almost the same thing, but not quite. But I'm going to use it like a drill press anyway. Because if you don't have the right tool for the job, use the wrong one. So you might notice that the bit is not exactly over my mark. That's fine as long as both holes are as far from the edge relative to each other. The reason why I'm doing it like that is because this is as far as the guard goes, and I don't want to try to drill a hole without the guard, so I'm just going to leave it there. Cutting fluid. Okay, so I've taken a steel strap and bent it into a hook like this as one of the radiator supports. So this is going to hook under the radiator, and then somewhere up here is where those plates I just made are going to weld onto. I've made this just a little bit wide on purpose because I'm going to line this with weather stripping so that as the car vibrates it doesn't wear a hole in the radiator. There's some padding there. And now I'm going to make another one. The reason why I'm hammering it rather than just bending it with brute force is if I just bend it with my strength, it'll end up with a big curve. And I don't really want that. If I want these tight corners, I need to hit it with a hammer. So I've got everything mounted in place where I want it. What I'm going to do now is tack weld plates onto these brackets and take everything off the car, cut down the excess, weld it up properly, and then put it back together. So these are the brackets. What I did is after tack welding them, I took them off the car, welded this whole seam, cut them down the shape and just kind of grounded them down a bit. My welds aren't the most consistent, but it's way more than strong enough for this application. So what I'm going to do now is just fill this in with epoxy to make it smooth, sand it out, prime and paint it so it looks pretty, and then mount it in the car. So the next thing up is the piping. As you saw before, the top hose sits pretty much exactly where it needs to be, but the bottom hose is on the opposite side. So I need to somehow get this over here. So I'm going to make some pipe to make that happen. As well, these sit pretty close, but I'm probably going to straighten this out a little bit to line up a little bit better with the one in the car. I don't want to modify the car because I want to be able to go back to a factory radiator or an aftermarket radiator made for a charger if I need to. So I'm going to try to bend that a little bit more straight. As well, the bottom pipe isn't exactly the same size on both. The top pipe is almost exactly the same size, but the bottom one isn't. So here's going to be my main pipe. I'm going to mount this low to try to clear the fans and stuff like that. I've got a pipe to mate with a hose that's for the Toyota Radiator. And I've got a pipe here that'll mate with the hose that's for the charger. And so what I'm going to do is just cut these and weld them on here at the correct angles and shorten this as much as I need to. I'm going to start with this side and then figure out how much I need to trim off this side. Based on how it sits in the car, Toyota Radiator wants to sit with the hose coming out like this. So I think I'm going to trim the hose like this, and mount this at an angle, and then this will be perfectly parallel with the radiator, just underneath it. So I want this at kind of an angle like that. So I'm going to chop this down, tack it in place, and see if it fits the way I want. Okay, well here's the completed pipe. Now, I'm not the best welder in the world, and I'm using flux core, which is not great for small things like this. And a lot of this is because I had to grind, and weld, and grind over and over again chasing pinholes. I think I've got all the pinholes now, but just as a plan B, I'm going to put some high temperature epoxy around the welds, so if there are pinholes I missed, it should catch it. The way I've been testing for pinholes is not ideal. What I've been doing first is putting the tube up to my eye, and then running a flashlight around the seam, and any light I see come through, I'll mark that spot and fill it. And then after I couldn't find any more light spots, I went and sealed one end with my hand, and I have a garden hose nozzle that fits almost perfectly in here. Shove that in there and just spray some water at hose pressure in here, and anywhere it weeped out, I would go back and weld again. And so it's been lots and lots of welding and grinding. It's kind of ugly, but I'm going to put some epoxy on here to both smooth it out and to catch any pinholes I missed, and then I'll paint it and throw it in the car. Okay, so now the radiator's in. The brackets I made are in, holding the bottom. Made these little brackets here just to secure the top. Top was connected. Down here, I made is connected. I might have to modify it because it's not sitting quite the right angle, but for now it's holding water. The transmission coolant lines are connected. So I've filled up the radiator. I haven't run the engine yet because I still don't have a fuel solution. And I've pressure tested it by blowing on this pipe as hard as I can. Nothing's leaking right now. It's not a true pressure test, but it's a good sign because nothing's leaking. I imagine that once we get some real pressure in it, I'll probably get a leak somewhere and have to modify something, but for now we're good to go.